Loads of cool new cards to review today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The first card that we're going to be looking at today is a new dual class card for Paladin and Priest. I believe the first dual class card for this combination. Gift of Luminance, 3 mana spell. Give a minion Divine Shield, then summon a 1/1 copy of it. I think this card is very, very good in these two specific classes. Both classes can make use of buff cards. Priest, historically has made use of a lot of buff cards in the form of Divine Fate, Divine Spirit, and Inner Fire, and obviously has the hero power to complement that as well. And giving a minion for Divine Shield for 3 mana, obviously that is pretty weak, but the ability to summon a 1/1 copy of it goes really well in Priest. Think about Convincing Infiltrator. That is already going to tilt so many people. Convincing Infiltrator, probably one of the most hated cards in Standard right now. The 5 mana 2/6 Death Rattle, and being able to give it Divine Shield and then summoning another copy of it, obviously then, which also has the Death Rattle and the Divine Shield, is very, very insane. I think this card is super, super strong. Will definitely fit into some sort of, Resurrect, Big Priest kind of thing. Res Priest, not really a thing right now in the meta, but could definitely come back with a card like this. It's very similar to a card they already have in Standard called Psyche Split, but I think it's a little bit better. It's 2 mana cheaper, and you're not getting the immediate stats, but you are getting the effect if it has a Death Rattle, if there's any sort of effect, if it's like a Sethic Veil Weaver as well. This is just a really good card to get off the random spell generations too, so it's just a really good card to have in the pool for Priest. And if you look at Paladin loves to make use of buffs. If you look at pure Paladin these days, they have Hand of Adal, they have the Libram of Wisdom, and the Libram of Wisdom obviously generates Death Rattle, which you can then copy with this card. If you play a bunch of 0 mana Libram of Wisdoms onto a minion, then you play Gift of Luminance, it actually copies all the Death Rattles, giving you more 0 mana +1/+1 buffs in hand. So overall, I think this card is pretty strong. I think we definitely will see play in pure Paladin. At the moment, it won't really see play in Galakron Priest. Maybe if Res Priest makes a comeback, this will definitely go into that, I think. And yeah, it's just good to get off the random spell generation. So for those reasons, I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. Next card we have is the adorable Infestation. Ultimate Infestation's little cousin is a 1 mana Hunter Druid spell that says give a minion +1/+1, summon a 1/1 cub, and add a cub to your hand. And just so you guys know, the cub is just a 1/1 token that has the beast tag. I think this card is super versatile. 1 mana give a minion 1/1, summon a 1/1 is kind of like a 1 mana 2/2 split around both minions, and you could argue, one attack of that has rush because you can put it on a minion that can immediately attack. So in that sense, it's pretty strong, right? It also again gives you a 1/1 in hand, so a little bit like Firefly back in the day. It's kind of, you can see it's kind of like a 1 mana 2/2 deal 1. Generate a 1/1 in hand, and if you look at it like that, that is incredibly strong, right? I think this card in a vacuum is really, really good. The problem I have with this card is, okay, where does it really see play, right? The most common Hunter and Druid decks right now are obviously Highlander Hunter. Do I see this card fitting in that? Not really. Highlander Hunter is not really like an aggro kind of deck, it's more of a mid-range deck. This card would fit in really well into an aggro kind of, maybe a Beast Hunter, because obviously you get the 1/1 tokens, but right now in Highlander Hunter, do you really want to play this? Maybe play this on a 1-drop on turn 2. You get a 1/1, you can play the 1/1 cub from hand as well to get a bit of a board. So maybe it's just good enough to see playing Highlander Hunter, but it doesn't really fit into that sort of deck in my opinion. And then if we look at Druid, okay, there's not really like a minion-based Druid deck. The spell Druids we have right now kind of just revolve around Glowfly Swarm and Mount Seller. So this card, I mean, it is a cheap spell, it is a 1 mana spell, so this can kind of fit into maybe, combo with Mount Seller turns and stuff like that, but there's not really like a tokeny Druid as we knew it from back in the day with, Acorn Bearer and, Dreamway Guardians, etc., with early game minions to buff. If that kind of Druid does come back into the meta, this card would be absolutely insane for it, because not only does it generate a minion, give a buff, but it also gives you another token in hand that you can put Soul of the Forest onto, you can put buffs onto. So this card is very, very strong, but at the moment it's not really going to see play, I don't think. Unless a new archetype does come into the fold. In the current decks, though, I don't think this card is super good. However, I think this might create a new archetype, especially in Hunter. There might be some sort of beast mid-range Hunter now, especially with the dual class legendary Shendo Wildclaw that we saw a couple of weeks ago, that obviously loves to play with beasts. Maybe some sort of aggressive mid-range beast hunter would come in. There needs to be a couple more beasts released though for that to happen, but I mean, this is just a strong card overall. So I'm actually going to give this card, I think I'm going to give this card a 5 out of 10. Even though I don't really see it fitting into any deck at the moment, I definitely think it can fit into some decks in the next expansion, with obviously some new archetypes coming into the fold. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for me. Pretty cool card. Next up, we have an insane Mage 1-drop. Researcher, that's not the official name, and it still hasn't been translated. But is a 1 mana 1/3, just 1 mana 1/3 for Mage, which is already an insane stat line. Everyone loves a 1 mana 1/3, but it has spell damage +1 as well. Wow. Just wow. This card is absolutely insane. I mean, even if it didn't have spell damage, 1 mana 1/3s are pretty good in Hearthstone historically. Right now, basically, Battle Mage sees play, and now has 4 total stats. In the past, something like Diamo has seen play. And obviously, this doesn't really have like a tribe, you know, it's not a beast, it's not a dragon or whatever. But it, you know, is still just a good stat line for 1 mana. And I think most major decks would love to see this card, unless you're, you know, no minion mage or spell mage. But the +1 spell damage is really what gets it for me. I think that's incredibly good utility for a 1 mana card to be able to grant you +1 spell damage, right? This is the first card that has allowed a player to get 1 spell damage without paying more than 2 mana, or 2 mana at least, right? We have Spell Damage Thanos, we have the Mana Reservoir, which are both 2 mana, but now you can actually get +1 spell damage for 1 mana, which is really, really flexible. You know, you can fit this card into a lot of removal turns, right? Getting 3 AoE Blizzards, getting 5 AoE Flame Strikes, you know, getting the Malagos spells a little bit more buffed up as well. You know, getting more Arcane Missiles and Arcane Explosion as well. You can now have a 3 mana combo that does consecration damage to the enemy board. That's really, really strong. I think this card will see play in every single mage deck, honestly. And this does fit into the kind of new spell damage mage deck that they're trying to push within this expansion. With the mage legendary Mozaki, this obviously has spell damage. It's very cheap as well. It's very versatile. And you can put this into combo turns where you're trying to burn the opponent out with Frostbolts and Fireballs potentially. And Mozaki buffed up a bunch of times with Sorcerer Apprentice. So yeah, I will definitely see playing that deck. I'm not sure if that deck's going to be good still. Obviously, they have printed a couple more cards to support it, but it still seems like kind of a meme in my opinion. However, I think this card will just see play in pretty much every mage deck, as I said. I mean, High End the Mage would love this card. As I said, even if you just played a 1 against aggressive decks, sure, that seems fine to me. If you save this card, if you draw it in the late game, you can put it into a combo turn. You can play this card along with the spell to get a little bit of buff for AoE spells, you know, maybe like Rolling Firewall, you need that 1 extra tick. And, you know, maybe, as I said, Flame Strike, Blizzard. So this card is just extremely versatile. I think it's extremely strong. Do I think Mage is going to be tier 1 though? That's the thing about this card. I'm not really sure. I really want to give this card a very high rating because I think it's just super cool. And it probably will see play in every Mage deck for the next 2 years. But I'm not sure if Mage is going to be tier 1. I think it might be high tier 2. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. I don't think it's quite going to be tier 1. I don't think I can warrant a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 for this card. But just because it's so strong, I think 8 out of 10 is pretty good. The next card we have coming up is a new 6 mana dual class spell for both Druid and Shaman. Runic Carvings. Choose 1, summon 4 2/2 Treant Totems, or overload 2, give them Rush. So initially when you look at this card, it might be a little bit confusing with the choose 1. Basically, how this card works is you're always going to get 4 2/2 Treant Totems. So I'm assuming those are just 2/2 tokens that have the totem tag, but also count as treants. So if you want like discounting things, or, you know, basically they count as a treant and a totem as well. And you're always going to get 4 of those with this card. But you have the option to pay 2 mana basically next turn. You have the option to have Overload 2 attached to this card if you want to give those 2/2 totem treant totems, whatever. It's going to get confusing. But if you want to give those tokens Rush. So it is either just a 6 mana summon 4 2/2s, which is basically 8 mana worth of stats for 6 mana. Okay, kind of decent. Or you can pay, you know, I guess 8 mana with the Overload to give those 2/2s Rush as well. So pretty interesting card. This is apparently a translation, as you can see at the bottom, so it might not be completely accurate, but it's pretty much the whole gist of this card. Now, what do I think about this card? Now, let's talk about Druid first, because obviously this is a dual class card. I think in Druid, this card is terrible. Mostly just because Glowfly Swarm exists, right? Why would you play this card when you can get 7 2/2 tokens for 5 mana, for 1 mana less, right? Even if it's like 5 or 6, that's still more than 4. This card will just never see play in Druid as of now, just because Glowfly Swarm exists, right? I don't see, you know. And also the Treant kind of Druid deck doesn't really exist anymore with Mulch Muncher and some of the totem, some of the Treant synergy cards. Is going to get really confusing. Some of those Treant synergy cards going away, so there's not really an incentive to play Treant tokens in Druid right now, so you might as well just play Glowfly Swarm, right? And you might as well even play Force of Nature, right? That's 1 mana less, you get 1 less 2/2, but the fact that it's 6 mana is very, very slow. I know you have Ramp in Druid, so you can play like Overgrowth into this, but getting 4 2/2s is just isn't really strong enough when Glowfly Swarm exists, right? So I do think this is pretty bad in Druid. However, in Shaman, I think this is a very strong card. Namely because I think now Totem Shaman is actually going to be quite good in the next expansion. Totem Shaman already kind of flirting around the bottom of tier 2 right now, in my opinion. And with some of the new cards that they've released, such as Totem Goliath, which is a 5 mana 4/5 with a Death Roll summon all basic totems, and now this card, obviously you get 4 totem tokens out of this card for 6 mana. That's pretty good. That's really, really good refill for Shaman, a class which, you know, has access to stuff like Bloodlust, has access to obviously like Totemic Reflection, Totemic Surge, Totemic Might. So I think some sort of Totem Shaman can actually come together in the next expansion. You know, playing Totem Goliath into this, and then the following turn going 5 to 6. That's a really good curve, and I can see that happening. I can see this being the top end of a Totem Shaman deck. You know, kind of like a token Totem Shaman deck as well that likes to go wide. I can play with Overload synergy as well, because this obviously can have the ability to have Overload as well. So sometimes you actually want the Overload effect in Shaman, so you can actually just, you know, get the Overload, you get the rush on these totems. Yeah, I think this is a really strong card in Shaman. Honestly, I think it'll push Totem Shaman to high tier 2, possibly even tier 1. It's a deck that can have really, really strong upside, because if you can stick a totem into Totemic Reflection, sometimes you just win the game outright. And having more refill and having more late game options for that archetype is very, very strong. So I think this card is actually great for Shaman, not so much for Druid right now. If they release more Treant synergies, yeah, maybe. But it just gets power spike for everything in Druid right now, right? You have Mount Sailor, Glowfly Swarm. You don't want to play this card, but I think this is a really strong card in Shaman. So yeah, because of that, I'm going to give this card a 6 out of 10. I would have given it higher if this was just purely a Shaman card, but because it's a dual class card, I want to review it both, you know, based on both the classes that it incorporates. And because it's only good for one class, I can't really give it that high of a rating. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 purely because I don't seeing any play in Druid. But yeah, I think this is a really strong card for Shaman. Up next, we have a very interesting dual class Mage Rogue legendary, JANDICE BAROV. 5 mana 2/1 Battle Cry. Summon 2 random 5-cost minions. Secretly pick one that dies when it takes damage. It's a very interesting effect. If you guys don't know what this means, what will happen is this JANDICE BAROV will summon 2 random 5-cost minions. That is not in your control. It will just be 2 minions, you know, either side of BAROV when you play it. So you're going to get 3 minions total with this 5 mana card. And then after you summon the 2 random 5 costs, you have the option to pick one of those minions, right? It's a secretly, so your opponent will have no idea which one you picked. And you're going to be able to pick one of those minions and effectively give it 1 health, right? Because it says it dies when it takes damage. So effectively it has like poisonous on itself, if that makes sense. It has like vulnerable, you know, it'll basically die to any ping, right? Or any proc by any minion. This card is really strong. I like this card a lot. I think it's really, really good. I have a lot of split opinion about it in the community. Some people think it's great. Some people think it's terrible. I honestly think it's pretty good. I'm on the side where I think this card is pretty decent, because if you look at it on the offset, you're getting at least one. So you're getting a random 5 cost, basically, right? You're also getting a 2/1. And you're also getting another minion that is a 5 cost but with 1 health, right? If you want to look at that. And that's pretty decent stats, right? For 5 mana. And you also go quite wide onto the board as well. So it's pretty difficult for your opponent to deal with wide boards sometimes. You know, they have to have those pings, right? Even though, yeah, you have a minion, maybe summon a 5/5, but it just actually has a 5/1 because it dies to a single ping. Well, okay, but you make your opponent have to ping, right? You make your opponent either have to spend 2 mana with the Mage Hero Power, or, you know, trade one of their bigger minions in. Sometimes they don't have just a 1/1 lying on board, right? Maybe you get your opponent trade a 3/3 in, and it doesn't feel too bad, right? Because they traded a 3/3 into your 5/1, basically, and that's okay. So I think this is not actually as bad as some people think. You're still getting decent tempo, right? The average 5/5 is probably like a 4/5 stat line, like a 9 total stats. You're at least guaranteed to get a 2/1 as well, right? So that's technically 12 stats already for 5 mana, which is solid, which is not too bad at all. You can high roll as well sometimes, get something like Waxadread, and stuff like that. You can also low roll as well. You can also get JANDICE BAROV, you know, herself, right? Imagine getting 3 JANDICE BAROVs from this. Those moments are going to happen. So this is a bit of an RNG type minion, obviously. So because of that, it can't be too powerful. And I don't think it is that powerful just because it's restricted by randomness. But I think on average, you're going to get some decent minions. You might get some upside death rattles. Even if you don't, you know, you get this mind game effect with your opponent, right? You know, maybe you have these 2 strong minions and your opponent's like, okay, I don't know which one he would have put the vulnerable on. I don't know which one he would have chose, right? Sometimes you could play a little game with your opponent. They'd expect you to normally, you know, pick the one that has lower stats and has a lower effect, right? But maybe you can flip that around and maybe you can pick the one that has actually higher stats as the one that will die when it takes damage for the first time. Your opponent will then attack wrongly and make a wrong trade. And it's a really good card because you're actually really smart and your opponent has to actually think when they're playing into this card. So for that reason, I like it a lot. Do I think it's that strong though? I think it's decent. It's decent. It will see play in some mage rogue decks. Not a lot though. Like, think about high end the mage. Would they really want to run this? It's not that impactful. I don't think so. There's better 5-drops for high end the mage. What other mage deck will really want to run this? I don't think any. But for rogue, it's actually pretty decent. 5 cost, I think. You know, you're able to play this on turn 5. It's not too bad. I think both classes can you know, use this card in some way in the future. Maybe not just right now. I think it's a pretty decent card. It is a little bit memey as well, and I think the randomness does actually, you know, limit it quite a bit because of all the mind games that it does generate for your opponent. And you can actually be really smart about this card as well, and the potential high rolls with, you know, Convincing Infiltrator and Waxadread. I think this card is pretty solid. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. I think we'll definitely see experimentation. It might see play in some sort of rogue deck. More likely in rogue than in mage, in my opinion. But yeah, it's a pretty cool card, and I think it's a really nicely designed card as well. Okay, now we have an insanely cool legendary, neutral legendary that was just revealed. Keymaster Alabaster. 7 mana, 6/8. Whenever your opponent draws a card, add a copy to your hand that costs 1. Firstly, very cool design, obviously. You know, if you play this card, it basically guarantees that you get one of your opponent's cards because they have the natural draw next turn, right? Let's say you just play this on turn 7, you end your turn. At the start of their next turn, you're going to get one of their cards. And you're also going to know what card they just drew. So a little bit of information, hand information as well with this card. But you're going to know what they have, and you're going to get a 1-cost copy of it, which usually is pretty nice. You know, most cards in your opponent's deck are going to cost more than 1. So you're going to get some sort of discount on their card. And usually it's going to be a pretty good card if they're putting it into their deck. So yeah, most of the time, this is basically just a 7 mana 6/8, you know, get a card from your opponent's hand and make it cost 1, basically. And is that good? I mean, it's okay. I think it's decent, but that's like the lowest low roll for this card, right? There is a potential for, if your opponent can't kill this card, it can, you know, give you more. It also restricts their card draw at the beginning of their turn. Obviously, everyone knows that you want to draw cards at the start of your turn rather than the end. So this kind of limits that a little bit. Maybe limits the amount of things your opponent can do, because obviously if they draw cards while this is on the board, you're going to get those minions, right? You're going to get those cards in hand, and they're only going to cost 1. So if your opponent can't deal with this very effectively, this could potentially give you, you know, 2-3 cards or 4 cards that cost 1, you know, and give it to you. And that's insane. That's absolutely insane. Do I see that happening very likely though? Not really, right? And the issue with this card is that it is just a 7 mana 6/8 do nothing, basically. There's no taunt, there's no rush. So when you play onto the board, it's not very impactful. It's not defensive at all. If you're playing as an aggro deck, they can just kill you the next turn. They don't care, right? Okay, you take one of my cards. Okay, but you're dead, right? I don't give a shit. So just because this card really does nothing on the turn it's played, it's very, very slow. The stats it's very understated for 7 mana. As well, there's decent amount of health, so it could be a little bit difficult to kill, but something like a Siphon Soul would just kill it easily. And you know, most of the time your opponent, if you're behind, could just kill it from what they have on board. So you're really only just going to get 1 minion most of the time. So it's actually not too great if you look at it that way. Okay, now let's think about, can you combo this card with other card draw effects in the same turn to guarantee the, you know, the effect popping off more for you? You're going to have used something like Research Project, right? Obviously, something like Cold Like Oracle has rotated to the Hall of Fame. That would have been really good with this card. But, like, are there any ways to make your opponent draw cards? Not really in Standard right now. There are a bunch of ways in Wild, obviously, namely Naturalize and obviously the Cold Like Oracle. But we are talking about Standard. And in Standard, there's not that many ways. So currently in Standard, there are no ways to really do this due to the fact that, you know, Research Project has actually rotated. There's no Cold Like Oracle. So it's a little bit awkward, honestly, this card. You're pretty much only just going to get 1 card from your opponent's hand. You do get a little bit of information, you know what they kind of have, and you kind of can play around it a little bit, but I just don't really see what deck wants to use this minion. It is very cool. I love the flavor. You know, stealing your opponent's cards is always fun. Maybe this can be used in Priest and, you know, do some shenanigans with Thought Steal and stuff like that. You know, just become like a really steely type of Priest, and I'm sure people will experiment with this card a lot. But I honestly think this card is really bad. I mean, I don't think many decks want to play this card. I think many decks can afford to play a 7 mana do nothing on the turn it's played. And then you get a bit of value, and maybe you potentially get more value, but just the fact that it's so, it doesn't impact the board immediately. I think this card is actually pretty bad. I know there's a lot of hype about this card and everyone loves it. I love the design. I do love the design. But if we're talking just about competitive viability, I honestly think this card will fall short. So I'm going to give this a 3 out of 10. I know that is very low. Let me know what you think in the comments below about this card. I might be wrong. I definitely might be wrong about it. But for me, this just doesn't do it, guys. Okay, last up, guys, we have a new Paladin and Priest dual class minion, the Devout Pupil. 6 mana, 4/5, Divine Shield Taunt. So obviously Sunwalker stats right there. But the effect is absolutely crazy, guys. Costs 1 less for each spell you've cast on friendly characters this game. That is absolutely insane. This is starting at 6 mana. It's going to be so easy to get this down to 0 mana, guys. You're going to only have to cast 6 spells on your characters. And think about Libram Paladin right now. Pure Paladin, Libram Paladin. This 100% fits into that deck. It's going to be absolutely insane. You're going to be able to get this down so cheap, so quickly with, obviously you have Libram Wisdoms. In that deck, you have Hand of Adal. There's that new Paladin card that gives Divine Shield in terms of 1/1 copy. There are so many spells in Paladin that, you're able to cast on your own characters. So this card is going to be absolutely insane in Paladin. Like, this is incredible. This is going to be 0 cost so quick, like maybe even before turn 4, turn 5. It's going to be 0 mana, 4/5 Taunt Divine Shield. That is so defensive, and this is exactly the card that Pure Paladin needs to really push it up to top tiers. Like, I'm expecting Pure Paladin to be high tier 2 now at least. This card is absolutely insane for Paladin. And if you look at Priest, it's definitely not as good for Priest. Obviously, Priest does have a lot of spells, but a lot of their spells is really reactive. And obviously, this has to be cast on friendly characters. So the issue with Priest and this card is that Priest, they have a lot of cards that like Shadow of Death, like Time Rip, that attack, the enemy's minions, and not so many cards that buff their own, right? Obviously, there are a few cards, maybe some sort of Tempo Priest would like to have this card because obviously Grave Runes, obviously Psychic Split, obviously Apotheosis is in the meta right now. And if you want some sort of Tempo buff Priest, maybe you play Power Infusion. Obviously, Sethic Veilweaver is going to be in that deck, so you can generate more spells. So if some sort of Tempo Priest does hold and does come to the forefront, I think this card would be great in it. Priest, as we see it today, definitely won't use this card, just because the 30 card list is pretty much already set, and this card doesn't really provide that much more utility for that deck for Galakron Priest. But for Paladin, my god, this is absolutely insane. I'm very excited for Pure Paladin in this next expansion now, because we had a couple of really nice Paladin cards in the last few days that really pushed the power level, and I think this card just really tops, it's the cherry on top of the cake. What a fantastic card. And for that reason, because I think it's going to be an absolute staple in Pure Paladin and in most Paladin decks for the next 2 years, and the fact that, the cards you can just discount and get to 0 mana. Think about Corridor Creeper, right, back in its day. Corridor Creeper was absolutely broken because of how easy you can get it to 0 mana. That they had to nerf it. This is not as good as Corridor Creeper, for sure, but it is still something, it's some insane tempo swing, and it's a card that you can get to 0 very quickly. So those cards are always very scary. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10, guys. I think this is going to be absolutely insane. This might even see a nerf after the expansion, just because it's mana cheating, right? And mana cheating has always been really powerful in Hearthstone, and some of the cards that have been the most powerful have been cards that are able to be discounted. Think about Mountain Giant, which is then rotated to Hall of Fame. Think about all the other cards. Obviously, Corridor Creeper I was talking about. So I think this card is going to be absolutely insane. Really good in Paladin. Maybe you'll see play in a Priest deck if some sort of Temper Priest does arise. But I mean, yeah, overall, this card is just fantastic. 9 out of 10 for me. Ooh, I'm excited. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you have enjoyed. If you have, please feel free to smash that like button and subscribe for more Hearthstone content. Only a couple more card reviews to go before all of the cards of Scholomance Academy are revealed. So very excited for that. We're doing a full breakdown of every single card afterwards. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.